In an unexpected twist of fate, a feared and all-powerful ruler from a war-torn world is reborn as a defenseless infant in a medieval fantasy realm. The moment he opens his eyes, he sees a man and woman gazing down at him with warmth and joy, their expressions filled with admiration. They marvel at how he resembles both of them, celebrating his arrival as their newest family member. The father, Reynolds, excitedly names him Arthur and immediately tries to get him to say Papa. The mother, Alice, chuckles, reminding him that the baby is far too young for that. As the two parents playfully fuss over their child, Arthur lies there in stunned silence. He doesn't recognize these people, nor does he understand why they're acting like they belong to him. If what they're saying is true, then it means he perished in his previous life and has been reborn, memories intact. Staring up at the vast night sky, Arthur struggles to comprehend how the feared conqueror of nations has been reduced to something so fragile. It's humiliating. And the worst part? He actually needs to be burped like a helpless baby. The sheer indignity of it is unbearable. Not that his new existence is entirely unpleasant. His parents are genuinely affectionate, clearly overjoyed by his presence. But that doesn't make him feel any less uncomfortable. The constant diaper changes are irritating, and a lingering paranoia nags at him. He is vulnerable, unable to defend himself if someone were to attack. The only thing he can do to reassure himself is clench his tiny fist. Reynolds notices and chuckles, thinking it's adorable. He gently places his finger in Arthur's hand, calling Alice over to witness how much their son loves him. Meanwhile, Arthur is still trying to adjust to his body, and in the middle of all his struggling, he accidentally soils himself. Alice steps in to handle the mess, and the embarrassment is so overwhelming that Arthur nearly sheds a tear. He wants to believe this is all just a ridiculous nightmare, but the reality is clear, this is his new life now. Still, things take an unexpected turn when Arthur notices something strange. Reynolds suddenly enhances his strength with what seems like a supernatural force. In an instant, his body surges with energy. Then Alice follows, effortlessly using a glowing power to heal him. Arthur has never seen anything like it. Magic didn't exist in his previous world, so watching it unfold before his very eyes is nothing short of mesmerizing. He wants to grasp everything, but for now, he knows he must grow stronger first. Later, Reynolds ventures into the forest and takes down a creature using his enhanced abilities. Not long after, a few of his companions arrive to spend time together. Back to our young protagonist, since there isn't much else for him to do, he starts carefully observing everything around him. Every small detail matters, and he absorbs as much knowledge as possible. If there's one constant in any world, it's that information is a powerful tool. Reynolds eventually returns home from his hunt, and Arthur begins to question whether carrying weapons is common in society. If so, that must mean the world beyond is dangerous enough to require it. This only reinforces his resolve. He must grow stronger quickly because survival depends on adaptation. There's so much he wants to ask, but his body isn't ready for that yet. Still, amidst all this frustration, a part of him feels content. His new family gives him moments of warmth, something he was never allowed in his past life. Back then, peaceful nights were a luxury he couldn't afford. Constant threats were part of the job, and every night brought another risk. But now, for the first time, he feels something close to tranquility. Gradually, he grows accustomed to it. As days, weeks, and perhaps months go by, Arthur learns to crawl. His first destination? A mirror, to check just how good he looks. Once he gains full control over his body, he starts sneaking out of bed whenever his parents aren't watching, always heading straight for the library. There, he eagerly flips through book after book, hungry to learn about this world. That's how he discovers that the continent he was born into is called Dicathan. It consists of 3 kingdoms: the Darv Kingdom, home to dwarfs, the Elenoir Kingdom, hidden deep in the forests and ruled by elves, and the Sapin Kingdom, where humans live, including Arthur himself. Unlike his previous world, where power was taken by force, this monarchy follows a line of succession. Once Arthur understands the basics, he shifts his focus. He wants to unlock the secrets of magic, and in the most unexpected yet endearing way. He reaches up and grabs a book from the shelf, eager to learn more. As he flips through the pages, he instinctively compares this world to the one he left behind. His previous life was technologically superior, built on industry and innovation. This one, however, operates on a different foundation: magic, or as it's called here, mana. According to the book, mana isn't a universal gift. It's inherited through bloodlines and manifests in only a small fraction of the population, roughly 1 in 100. It exists in 2 primary forms: augmentation, which strengthens the body using mana, and conjuration, which allows for energy-based abilities with limitless potential. As he reads, he recalls the healing magic his mother used earlier. The realization strikes, she must be a conjurer. The book explains that all mana users possess a mana core, which typically awakens during adolescence. Mastering its use is what separates novices from full-fledged mags. The concept reminds him of something familiar from his old world, a force akin to ki. Yet, despite the similarities, he's uncertain whether this arcane power will be an effective weapon for him. Regardless, he decides to test it. He concentrates, trying to summon even the faintest trace of energy from within. Just as he begins to feel a shift, Alice swoops in out of nowhere, scooping him up like a prized treasure. At first, he panics, thinking she might have sensed his attempt. But no, it's worse. She declares, with absolute certainty, that he has soiled himself. The unmistakable odor confirms it. As Alice carries him off to be cleaned, he silently despairs. Being stuck in this powerless body is nothing short of a nightmare, and the indignities keep piling up. He swears to himself, once again, that he will gain strength, no matter what. Later, Alice sits down to document his growth in her journal. She's genuinely pleased with his rapid development, but something still weighs on her. He hasn't smiled. Not even once. That thought lingers longer than she expects, leaving her unsettled. Gazing out the window, she spots Reynolds outside, wooden sword in hand, cradling Arthur as he playfully demonstrates some moves. Reynolds grins as he calls out to her, boasting about Arthur's progress. But Alice isn't amused, she's livid. Storming outside, she scolds him sharply. It's far too early for him to be handling weapons, she snaps. Reynolds attempts to defend himself, but it's pointless. Alice refuses to let their son play warrior just yet. Meanwhile, Arthur watches everything intently, absorbing their dynamic. He studies their exchanges, using them as a guide to decipher relationships and authority in this world. He begins to suspect something interesting, perhaps in this new land, women truly hold all the power. Later that day, Alice takes Arthur to the market, and every little thing amazes him. Every sound, every sight, every object feels like an entirely new discovery, especially since half of these things didn't even exist in his previous world. The real highlight, though, is witnessing magic up close. It alone makes the entire trip worthwhile. On the way home, as drowsiness sets in, Arthur reflects on how much his family has been there for him. When they finally reach the house, Alice carries him straight to his room, speaking softly about how proud she is of his curiosity, how he sneaks out of bed just to read or gets excited every time they visit the market. She laughs, saying he might take after Reynolds and run off to explore the world, though, deep down, she hopes for him to have a quieter, safer life. That evening, Arthur watches Reynolds practicing magic in the yard. At first, he's thrilled, eager to learn by watching. But when Reynolds only lifts a few small rocks, Arthur's excitement fades. Before he can feel too disappointed, Alice reassures him that Reynolds is just getting started. Sure enough, moments later, Reynolds channels more mana and begins displaying incredible skills. Arthur quickly realizes his father is an augment, someone who enhances their physical abilities with mana. The idea excites him, making him imagine all the things he'll be able to do once he develops his own mana core. Just as he's lost in thought, Alice picks him up, reminding him it's bedtime. On the way to his room, he spots a book on the shelf and immediately reaches for it, pleading to read. At first, Alice resists, but seeing his eyes light up, she gives in, letting him read for a bit. Flipping through the pages, Arthur recalls everything he's learned so far, all the steps he needs to form his mana core. Determined, he closes his eyes and starts channeling mana, drawing energy toward a single point. His parents assume he's fallen asleep, but suddenly, a powerful explosion shakes the house. Without hesitation, Reynolds shields Alice, taking the full brunt of the blast across his back. Though injured, he quickly ensures Alice is unharmed before both of them rush toward Arthur's room, only for their hearts to nearly stop at what they see. Arthur is floating in midair, descending gently as if it's completely natural. In that breath-stopping moment, the ceiling above begins to crumble. Too young to react in time, Arthur is vulnerable, but his parents leap into action, shielding him from the falling debris. Overwhelmed by relief, the three of them burst into tears, and for the first time, Arthur truly feels the unwavering love and protection of his family, a warmth so different from the isolation of his past life. The realization moves him deeply, and for the first time, he cries, not out of sorrow, but out of something much more profound. We shift back to a memory from Arthur's past life, where he once reigned as King Grey. During his rule, a royal servant was discovered plotting to assassinate him. By royal decree, the punishment should have been immediate execution. However, his council opted instead to banish the man and his family back to their native land. The traitor, knowing full well what awaited them there was far worse than death, was gripped by fear. He dropped to his knees, begging King Grey to show mercy, if not for him, then at least for his wife and child. But Grey, showing no emotion, ended both their lives in front of the man. It wasn't vengeance. It was his own warped version of mercy. He understood that dying by his hand would spare them the cruelty of what their homeland had in store. Shockingly, the assassin, shattered and hollow, thanked him. Now reborn, Arthur has just turned 4. He's training with his father, Ray, who gifts him a set of combat gloves, identical to his own. Arthur respectfully declines, choosing to stick with his wooden sword. He explains that the gloves would reduce his reach and put him at a disadvantage due to his small build. Ray doesn't argue. Instead, he nods and they begin their usual sparring session. But today, something changes. Mid-fight, Arthur channels mana into his sword for the first time, catching Ray off guard. With that sudden boost, he effortlessly disarms his father. It marks Arthur's first victory in their matches, and Ray is left speechless, stunned by his son's rapid progress. That evening over dinner, Ray brings up the idea of getting Arthur a Rael teacher. He's starting to realize his own lessons might no longer be enough. Alice strongly objects. To her, hiring a tutor means sending Arthur alone to the city at just 4 years old. Ray holds his ground, arguing that Arthur's magical ability to enhance objects is too rare to leave undeveloped. The discussion quickly heats up as both parents dig in. Arthur breaks the tension by offering a middle ground. He proposes they all move to the city together. That way, Ray gets him proper training, and Alice won't be separated from her son. It's a win for everyone, and they agree to the plan, starting preparations for their move right away. A few days later, Ray's old adventuring party, the Twin Horns, arrive to escort the family. Arthur greets them politely, prompting their leader, Adam, to reintroduce himself. He jokes that Arthur probably doesn't remember their last meeting. But Arthur does, clear as day. It was the time he accidentally destroyed their house with a magical mishap. The Twin Horns had helped rebuild their home, and that's when Arthur overheard that his parents had once been part of the group. After Adam finishes, Angela rushes in and hugs Arthur so hard it nearly knocks the air out of him. Durden, the group's tank, notices and kindly intervenes, easing Arthur out of her grip. That's when Arthur sees a girl silently observing him from the top of the carriage. She has a calm, unreadable expression. Her name is Jasmine, and she says nothing, just watches him closely. Arthur is momentarily captivated by her gaze. Then Helen walks up, greets him warmly, and introduces both herself and Jasmine with a cheerful smile. With introductions finished, the group began their trek towards Zira City. As they traveled, Arthur found himself quietly comparing this old-fashioned way of transport to the advanced tech of his past life, where flying vehicles were the norm. Still, he didn't complain. His mother was beside him, cheerfully chatting, making everything feel warm and familiar. Their journey included several stops, and during one break, they were suddenly attacked by a group of wild wolves. It was Arthur's first real exposure to the dangers of the outside world. But Jasmine didn't hesitate. She reacted instantly, her daggers gleaming as she tore through the creatures effortlessly. Ray, Adam, and the others quickly followed her lead, stepping in to finish the job. Arthur stood back, observing intently, and that moment sparked a fire in him. He swore to himself that one day, he'd stand beside them in battle. That evening, as they settled in for dinner, Arthur noticed something odd. His mother hadn't eaten anything, claiming she wasn't hungry, but her tone felt off. When she spotted a wound on Ray's arm, she moved without a second thought, placing her hand over it and beginning to heal. The moment her magic activated, the group's energy shifted. Everyone fell silent and alert, subtly creating a barrier around her from any potential onlookers. It was then Arthur began connecting the dots. Healing magic wasn't just rare, it was extraordinary. Their life in isolation hadn't just been about peace and quiet, it was to keep Alice's healing powers a secret from the rest of the world. Later that night, Adam pulled Arthur aside, curious to see for himself if Ray's stories about his son's talent were true. The rest of the team joined in, clearly eager to watch. What should have been a small test turned into a full-scale showcase. Arthur, still only 4 years old, quietly questioned whether anyone was worried about his safety. This was his first real match against someone besides his father. Unlike Ray, who used a harmless training stick, Adam came in with an actual spear, its tip dulled with cloth but still dangerous. As soon as the spar began, Adam powered his weapon with mana, and Arthur instinctively matched him, charging his body with magic, but he didn't stop there. He channeled energy into his legs, rocketing forward with explosive speed. In an instant, he slipped between Adam's legs and landed a clean hit before darting away. The audience was stunned into silence by the sheer speed and accuracy of the move. The duel continued, and this time they clashed directly. But the difference in strength was glaring. Arthur's body lacked the raw power to match, and the next strike sent him flying. He was tossed like a doll through the air, the impact brutal. In that moment, Arthur realized just how fragile his young body still was. Before he hit the ground, Angela reacted swiftly, using wind magic to cushion his fall and lower him gently. Durden stepped in immediately, calling out Adam for going overboard. He reminded him that it was just a spar, not a battlefield. Adam raised his hands in surrender, admitting he got carried away, but only because Arthur's technique had completely thrown him off. He turned to Ray and asked what kind of intense training he'd put the kid through to make him this sharp at such a young age. Ray just shrugged and said he hadn't done anything at all. Not far off, Arthur notices Jasmine watching him with her trademark stare, piercing and unwavering. She bluntly demands to know how he fights the way he does, insisting that he teach her. From her flat expression, Arthur quickly figures out that she won't let this go anytime soon. The next day, the group resumes their journey and eventually halts at a peaceful, wide clearing, perfect for squeezing in some training. Adam jumps in to give Arthur a few pointers with the spear, while Ray flexes exaggerated muscle poses to show off to his son Bob, who plays along without complaint. Afterward, Helen takes over for a brief archery lesson, and before long, Arthur's arrows start hitting center with near-perfect accuracy. Once training winds down, Jasmine finally gets her turn. She's clearly been waiting for it, and unexpectedly, she picks up the fundamentals faster than Arthur had anticipated. That evening, while Arthur reads quietly, Jasmine ends up staring at him again, like she's studying his face for answers to questions she hasn't even asked. Before long, it stops being a stare and starts bordering on something closer to a silent obsession. Morning arrives, and with it, Arthur's birthday. Surprisingly, Jasmine is the one who steps up and hands him a dagger as a gift. To the surprise of everyone, especially the other girls, she even explains the weapon's handling with surprising detail. Adam, likely fed up with the slow burn tension, loudly suggests it's time to get moving again. That's when Alice calls Arthur over, but suddenly clutches her stomach, her expression faltering. Arthur immediately senses something isn't right. She tries to pass it off with a weak smile, claiming she's fine, but her tone doesn't sell it. The journey continues until they're hit with a full-blown bandit ambush. With no time to waste, everyone leaps from the carriage and prepares to fight. A volley of arrows rains down, but Angela quickly raises a protective magic shield. Arthur glances out and quickly sees they're surrounded. The bandit leader, whose face looks like it took one too many punches, yells at his crew not to kill the women and kids. He wants to sell them off for profit. The attackers rush in with zero fear. Though Alicia is visibly nervous, she encourages Arthur to stay calm. Before they're overwhelmed, Durden barrels forward, launching a few attackers back and engaging in close combat. One bandit nearly hits Ray, until Helen lands a shot right through the chest. Adam follows up, tearing through enemies with his spear like they're paper, and Jasmine eliminates her foes with fast, clean dagger slashes. Watching everyone in action, Arthur finally grasps just how powerful each of them really is. But numbers aren't on their side. More and more enemies pour in, and the group's stamina starts to falter. Suddenly, Ray is hit hard and thrown into the carriage. He goes down and doesn't get up. The bandit leader starts walking toward Alice and Arthur, that twisted grin still plastered on his face. Seeing Ray like that stuns them both, but before they can rush to his side, Ray stirs. Bruised and barely on his feet, he still manages to call out, telling them to stay back. Even now, he's trying to protect them. Ray turns to Arthur with a grave urgency in his voice. "Take your mother and go, now." But Arthur, stubborn as ever, digs in his heels and refuses to abandon them. That's when Ray drops the truth like a thunderclap: Alice is pregnant. The weight of that revelation hits Arthur like a freight train. Suddenly, her fatigue, the subtle changes, everything makes sense. Without missing a beat, Ray locks eyes with him and says, "I'm counting on you to protect them, both your mom and the baby." That's all Arthur needs. His hesitation vanishes, replaced with fire. He grips Alice's hand and bolts, heart pounding like war drums. Behind them, the bandit leader, all bark and bloodlust, roars at his crew to give chase. Just as they close in, Ray dives into the chaos, cutting them off. His stand buys Arthur the seconds he needs. But just when it looks like the pursuers might catch up, a flurry of knives whistles through the air. Jasmine and Adam show up like ghosts, clearing the path with deadly precision. In an instant, the twin horns are back in action, locking blades and holding the enemy at bay while Arthur and Alice flee into the wild. As they run, Arthur's mind flashes to his past. He once took lives like it meant nothing. Now, he's shaking at the thought of losing someone who finally matters. It stings, a cruel joke from the universe. His fists clench, but he's just a kid, helpless against it all. Then his instincts scream, danger. He looks up and spots a shadow high above, magic already charging. He reacts on pure impulse, pushing Alice aside as a spell tears through the sky and slams into him. The blast knocks him off his feet, and then he's gone, tumbling over the cliff's edge. But Arthur refuses to fall alone. Summoning what strength he has left, he grabs the dagger Jasmine once gave him. With one desperate throw, the blade soars and the cord wraps tight around the caster's leg, yanking them down with him. Durden and Angela try to catch him with their magic, but he's already too far out of reach. As he falls, everything slows. He locks eyes with his mother, her arms reaching, lips trembling, tears cutting lines through the dirt on her cheeks. She's screaming silently, powerless. Arthur's heart aches, not for himself, but for her. At least she's safe. That's what matters. Still, he wishes he could have met his little brother. But then, somewhere in the dark below, he survives. Barely. Bruised, dazed, lungs gasping for air, Arthur opens his eyes to see something massive looming above him. A beast, towering, monstrous, and it knows his name. Panic spikes through him. What fresh hell is this? He scrambles up, every instinct screaming at him to run. With no plan, he launches a wild strike, but the creature flicks him aside like a feather and tells him to relax. It isn't here to hurt him. Says it just wants to be friends. Right. Because that's always how it starts. Arthur narrows his eyes. Trust isn't exactly his strong suit, especially not with nightmare creatures talking friendship. He's still battered, every bone screaming, hunger gnawing at his gut. The beast notices. Without a word, it plucks glowing fruit from the cave walls and offers it. Arthur hesitates, because eating weird glowing fruit from a monster's lair, that's just asking for a bad day. The name Wolfruit didn't exactly inspire confidence, and Arthur was already on edge. He tried to get up and reason his way out of the situation, but as soon as he moved, a loud crack echoed from his body. Pain exploded through him, forcing him back down, tears streaming as he cried out helplessly. The creature nearby gave an exasperated sigh, telling him to stop whining. He was lucky to be alive after tumbling off that mountain. Arthur wanted to ask 1,000 questions, but the beast made one thing clear: no answers until he ate. Left with no other choice, Arthur reached for one of the odd fruits and took a bite. To his surprise, it was delicious. Before long, he was devouring them in handfuls like a starving child at a banquet. Once he'd eaten his fill, Arthur turned back to the creature and asked if it knew anything about his parents or what happened after the ambush. The creature explained that it couldn't leave the cave, but it had the ability to observe the world beyond. To prove it, it conjured a floating image in the air. Arthur watched, stunned, as it showed his parents defeating the attackers and leaving days ago. Tears welled in his eyes again, but this time they were from joy. His parents were safe. He thanked the creature sincerely, and realizing he'd be stuck here while he recovered, decided to let his guard down a little. The creature introduced herself as Sylvia. Despite her fearsome appearance, she showed nothing but kindness and patience. Over the following days, Arthur stayed in the cave, eating and resting as his body gradually healed. Sylvia never left his side, caring for him without asking for anything in return. When he was finally strong enough to consider leaving, his first thought was getting back home. But Sylvia quickly shut that down. She explained that the cave was near the outskirts of the Elleshur forest, a place filled with lethal magical creatures and vicious outlaws far worse than the ones who'd attacked his family. If he left now, he wouldn't survive. But that didn't mean he was trapped forever. Sylvia revealed that she could open a dimensional gateway, one that might take him somewhere safe, possibly even home. The catch was, it would take time to form. Until then, all he could do was wait. With little else to occupy his time, Arthur picked up a stick and began practicing sword swings. If he was stuck here, he might as well make use of it. Days passed. Though he still didn't know much about Sylvia, Arthur found himself enjoying her presence. She remained mysterious, an imposing figure clearly hiding from something, but she was also one of the kindest souls he'd ever met. After another session of practice, Arthur sat on a flat stone and began focusing on his mana. Sylvia watched in silence, her expression unreadable. For someone so young, he already had a mana core, but his technique was unrefined, clearly self-taught. Without saying a word, she raised her hand. Instantly, mana spiraled into her palm with incredible control. Arthur could barely believe what he was seeing, not just spell casting, but mana collection mid-cast. If that kind of control was possible, then mastering it meant true power. Just as Arthur was about to ask Sylvia to teach him, she paused and glanced his way. Before she gave him any knowledge, she needed to know what he intended to do with such power. He hadn't really considered it before, but as she asked, a memory came rushing back, one that still burned in his mind. Those bandits, the way they nearly took everything from him. The helplessness he felt as his family stood on the brink of death. Without hesitation, Arthur blurted it out. He wanted that power to erase anyone who threatened the people he cared about. Sylvia didn't take kindly to that answer. Without speaking, she stepped forward and flicked him on the forehead, sending him reeling. Then she told him bluntly that she'd never pass on such a skill to someone with that kind of mindset. Arthur, confused and holding his forehead, couldn't quite grasp what was wrong with wanting strength to protect those he loved. To him, it made sense, especially after what he'd been through. Sylvia leaned in and softly placed a single finger on his forehead. Her voice was calm as she told him that the same finger could have crushed his skull, or, like now, could simply rest there with care. Then she asked, which feeling would he rather carry with him? Arthur chose the gentle touch, of course. She explained further, rage and vengeance are tempting paths, but they only lead to destruction. They're easy to follow but hard to leave behind. She didn't want him throwing his life away chasing shadows. So, once more, she asked what he truly wanted that power for. This time, Arthur stopped and really thought. Not about pain or fear, but about the people who made life worth living. Their laughter, their faces, their warmth. And with those memories in his heart, he told her he wanted the strength to keep them safe. That, finally, made Sylvia smile. It was the answer she had been hoping for. Meanwhile, outside the safety of the cave, another presence crept closer, something eerily similar to Sylvia. It had been hunting her, and now it had arrived. In his past life, Arthur had been a king, but not one with real control. The council held the reins. He had merely been a weapon, a tool used to wage wars and silence opposition. That role had left him bitter and hollow. But this world, and Sylvia's guidance, offered him a different path. She began training him, showing him how to gather ambient mana and compress it. Arthur followed her steps closely. It took some effort, but soon enough, he succeeded, pulling in the energy and channeling it through his body. The power surged through him, alive and raw. Overcome with awe, he rushed towards Sylvia to thank her, but suddenly, she stiffened. Her eyes sharpened as if she sensed something coming. Without a word, she shoved Arthur behind a pile of rocks and whispered a warning to stay hidden and silent. From his hiding spot, Arthur peered through the cracks. A towering beast emerged, one that resembled Sylvia almost exactly. The tension between them was obvious. Sylvia didn't say a word, but Arthur could feel it. This wasn't a friend. The creature wasted no time. It ordered Sylvia to come with him. When she refused, he responded not with words, but action, lunging at her in an instant. Arthur wanted to leap in, but Sylvia's voice echoed in his mind, warning him to stay back. She would deal with this herself. The stranger gave her one final warning. He didn't want to kill her, but would if forced. Sylvia's reply was fierce and final. She said she'd rather fall in battle than obey someone like him. And then, Arthur witnessed it, her transformation. Sylvia's true form erupted forth. A dragon radiant with raw mana, energy crackling through the air. In that moment, Arthur saw her full might unleashed. Sylvia gathers her remaining strength and unleashes a massive wave of energy at the towering beast before her. It raises a barrier just in time, deflecting the worst of the blast. Gritting its teeth, it warns her that pushing herself like this will kill her in her condition. But Sylvia is unshaken. She's lived through centuries and carries no regrets. This moment is all that matters. With a final surge of willpower, she drives the creature back and slams it against a crumbling wall. He recovers almost instantly, retaliating with a relentless storm of magical attacks. Sylvia absorbs each hit, wincing, but her attention isn't on herself, it's on the boy she's hidden nearby. The battlefield is creeping dangerously close to where she concealed him. When the enemy gathers energy for a final, devastating blast, Sylvia knows dodging isn't an option. Arthur's life would be at risk. So she does the unthinkable, she halts time itself. In the frozen stillness, she calls Arthur from his hiding place. The moment he steps out and sees her in her true form, a dragon, his eyes widen with awe and confusion. Questions swirl in his mind, but there's no time to answer. Her time-free spell is already breaking down. She tears open a dimensional rift she's been preparing in secret, but her injuries have taken their toll. The portal destabilizes, leading not to his home but to some unknown location, most likely a wilderness. She hates to cast him into uncertainty, but there's no time to fix it. Regardless, she believes in him. Sylvia looks into his eyes and asks him once more, what will he do with the strength he now holds? Arthur doesn't hesitate, he vows to protect those he loves. That brings her a fragile sense of peace. Before he departs, she gifts him two things, a strange egg pulsing with warmth and a shimmering feather. She asks him to wrap the egg in the feather and guard it with his life. Then, calling upon the last of her power, she marks both his arms with glowing sigils, vibrant with mana. They stretch from shoulder to wrist like ethereal tattoos, humming with hidden meaning. Arthur stares in shock, but Sylvia doesn't have the strength left to explain. She simply tells him the truth will come in time, but she won't be there to help him understand it. Quietly, she confesses one last thing. She could have sent him home the moment he arrived, but she kept him close because she cherished their time together. That choice, selfish though it was, placed him in danger. Arthur is overwhelmed by guilt and grief. He tells her that despite everything, despite not being related by blood, she feels like a mother to him. Sylvia smiles softly and reminds him that he already has a mother. So, with a grin, he calls her his grandmother instead. It takes her by surprise, and for a moment, her ancient heart aches in a beautiful way. She asks him to say it again, just once more. And he does, without hesitation. With time collapsing around them, she nudges him toward the portal. He clutches the gift she gave him, his heart heavy. But before he steps through, he turns and reaches for her, asking her to come with him. Sylvia stays rooted in place, not because she wants to, but because she has no other choice. With a heavy heart, she seals the portal and sends Arthur away. As soon as he vanishes, time resumes its flow, and the incoming energy blast slams directly into her. The impact is brutal. Sylvia crashes hard, but the attacker remains suspicious. He knows her strength too well to believe that was enough. Cautiously, he steps closer, lowering his guard just slightly. That proves to be his undoing. The moment he's in range, Sylvia draws on the last remnants of her power and unleashes a final, devastating strike. The explosion obliterates him and everything else within a mile radius. Meanwhile, Arthur is hurtling through the dimensional rift when he hears Sylvia's voice one final time. She reminds him of what she said about true strength, and he hasn't forgotten. Still, sorrow grips him. Sylvia speaks again, saying the world is full of pain and tragedy, but that's exactly why it needs people like him. Arthur begins to argue, doubting he could ever make that kind of difference. But Sylvia doesn't expect a miracle. She just wants him to move forward, step by step. After all, this isn't his first time influencing a world. She knows about his past life, about the ruler he once was. Though she didn't always agree with the way he led, she believes that if he doesn't give in to bitterness, he can become the kind of king this realm desperately needs. Sometime later, Arthur comes to. He's lying on the forest floor, body aching, vision hazy. But one thing is clear in his mind, he made a vow, and he intends to keep it. First, though, he has to get out of this damn forest. Just as he starts moving, a rustling behind him draws his attention. Then a scream rips through the trees. A child's voice, high-pitched and terrified. Without hesitation, Arthur channels mana to his legs and sprints toward the sound. He leaps into a tall tree to gain vantage and sees a scene that makes his stomach turn. A group of bandits are restraining a young elf girl. She tried to run, but they caught her, one of them muffling her cries with a hand clamped over her mouth. They're planning to sell her for a fortune on the black market once they get out of the woods. She's tied up and thrown into a carriage like cargo. Watching this unfold triggers something in Arthur. Memories of the night bandits came for his family, of the awful things they said about keeping him and the women alive. His blood burns with rage. He wants nothing more than to annihilate them all right there. But then Sylvia's words echo in his thoughts, urging restraint. He forces himself to breathe, to think. Rushing in now could get the girl killed. So he waits, blending into the shadows. The bandits eventually get moving again, and Arthur trails them silently until night falls. Once they stop to make camp, he crouches nearby, still weighing his options. Then he hears one of them laughing, talking about how elves are his favorite and how they might sampled her before the sale. That's it. Arthur's done waiting. He still needs the cover of full darkness, but his mind is set. Closing his eyes, he enters a meditative state, preparing himself for the violence to come. Once the sky turns dark, Arthur opens his eyes, calm and alert, and begins laying out his strategy. Nearby, he notices several horned wolves bound by heavy chains, an odd sight, since wild creatures like these wouldn't typically tolerate humans. A second glance shows they're wearing enchanted restraints, likely forced into compliance. Arthur sees potential in that. He picks up a few acorns and lightly tosses them toward the wolves to rile them up. The beasts begin to howl, their noise breaking the quiet night and pulling the attention of the camp. The gang's leader snaps at one of his men to go shut the wolves up before they cause more trouble. Grumbling, the man obeys, walking over and roughly kicking one of the animals to silence it. That's Arthur's opening. He conjures a blade from raw mana and silently drops behind the distracted bandit. With one smooth motion, he ends the man where he stands. Moving quickly, Arthur takes his weapon. Another thug steps over to investigate the noise, but Arthur meets him halfway, springing onto his back and slashing his throat before he can react. 2 down. But Arthur is already feeling the strain. He knows he doesn't have the energy for a drawn-out fight. Another bandit approaches, wondering why no one's returned. Arthur strikes first, aiming for a critical hit, but misses the mark. The man cries out, Arthur's stealth advantage is gone. The boss of the gang instantly picks up on the situation. He sees Arthur and realizes it's a young mage causing all the chaos. That changes things. He figures the boy might fetch a good price, maybe even more than the elf girl. With that, he channels energy into his limbs and charges. Arthur dodges and counters with a kick, but the leader shifts away easily. Arthur flings his knife in desperation, but the man catches it midair, then uses the moment to slam Arthur down hard. He seizes Arthur by the ankles, holding him up with a cruel smirk. Mocking him, the man says a kid has no chance against grown strength. And Arthur doesn't argue. He knows brute force won't win. So he stops trying. Drawing in his remaining magic, he sends a fireball straight into the man's leg. While he reels in pain, Arthur doesn't hesitate. He drives the knife into his skull, ending the fight. Only one remains, the bandit who'd been injured earlier. Arthur finishes him off quickly. Then he heads to the carriage. Inside, the girl is still blindfolded, unaware of what just took place. Arthur gently reassures her that everything's fine now, that she's safe. She tells him her name is Tessia. As he helps her out of the carriage, he tells her she can go home now. But she catches sight of the blood on his hands and starts to panic. Arthur isn't surprised. Anyone her age would be shaken by that scene. To spare her from seeing more, he tells her to stay put while he handles the mess. He walks off and quickly hides the bodies from view. When Tessie asks what happened to her captors, Arthur avoids the grim details and simply says they won't be coming back. She doesn't press him further. Arthur grabs her belongings from the bandit supplies, hands them to her, and starts to leave. But just as he turns, she grabs his arm, begging him not to abandon her. She's terrified, afraid of being left alone in the forest, where anything could happen. Arthur asks if she at least knows how to get home. Tessie responds that she has a rough idea of the direction, but no clue how far it is. Arthur doesn't like the idea of veering off course, but leaving her alone isn't an option either. She wouldn't last a day out here. In the end, he agrees to escort her back to her village. As they prepare to leave, Arthur glances at the wolves that had been held by the bandits. He briefly considers riding them to speed up the journey, but he has no idea how to handle wild animals. Better not to take the risk. Tessia, on the other hand, insists on freeing them by removing their enchanted collars. Arthur cautions her that they might attack once unbound, but she doesn't seem too concerned. She's lived in this forest her whole life and feels a sense of duty to protect its creatures. She takes off the collars, and, to Arthur's surprise, the wolves quietly slink away into the forest without causing any trouble. The next day, the two are already moving in the direction of her village. After a few hours of walking, they stop for a break. Arthur prepares a basic stew and urges Tessia to eat. There's still a long journey ahead, and she'll need strength. She wrinkles her nose at the taste. The stew smells odd and is just salted dried meat in water. Nothing fancy, but it's food. As they eat, Tessia gets curious and asks what brought Arthur to Elshire Forest in the first place. It's not often a young human turns up here. Arthur tells her he got separated from his family and wandered in by accident. Since they're already talking, he flips the question and asks her about living in the kingdom of Eleanor. That gets her excited. She starts gushing about it. Her parents are usually too busy with official duties, so she spends most of her time with her grandfather and their household attendant. As they continue down the trail, the uncertainty grows. Tessia doesn't actually know how far the village is. To make matters worse, one of the wolves she freed earlier has been following them at a distance. Arthur starts thinking he should have dealt with the wolves back then. That night, he chooses to sleep outside the tent, wanting to stay alert in case the wolf gets too close. But not long after, Tessia sticks her head out and pleads with him to come inside. He tries to tell her he's fine and that someone needs to stay on watch, but she clearly doesn't want to be left alone. Eventually, after some coaxing, he gives in and joins her in the tent. He figures he can still keep an eye out from inside if it helps her sleep better. Tessia tries to hide her fear, but it's obvious she's shaken. She even asks Arthur to stay close to her the whole night, even when nature calls. Before drifting off, she randomly asks him about human culture. She wants to know if it's true that humans are all perverts with dozens of wives. Arthur is stunned and asks where she got that idea. Turns out her grandfather told her. Arthur explains that while some nobles have harems, most humans are normal and respectful. Satisfied with that answer, Tessie turns away and quietly falls asleep. Thankfully, the wolf never showed up during the night. By morning, they pack up and hit the road again. Over the past few days, Tessia has started to warm up to Arthur. With the worst behind her, she finally begins to smile again. She's completely out of her depth in the wilderness, unable to even cross a small stream without assistance. So, Arthur ends up having to carry her across, much like hauling a sack of flour. Out of nowhere, though, a sharp pain suddenly strikes his chest. It's overwhelming and disorienting, and he can't figure out what's going on. Tessa panics and dashes into the forest, hoping to find some herbs to help, but Arthur suspects it's more than just a random illness. He leans against a tree, struggling to stay upright, and that's when the same wolf from before shows up. Arthur tenses immediately. If the wolf attacks now, he's as good as done for. Just when things seem to take a turn for the worse, Tessie returns with the herbs and Arthur warns her to keep a safe distance in case the wolf turns hostile. But instead of attacking, the wolf casually strolls over and drops a dead pig at Arthur's feet, then turns and walks away. Arthur stands there, dumbfounded. Tessie wonders aloud if the wolf was just showing gratitude for letting it go earlier. That night, they set up camp and enjoy roasted meat by the fire, a welcome upgrade from the bland stew they had earlier. Tessia, thrilled by the meal, mentions how she found some mushrooms while gathering herbs, offering them to Arthur. In hindsight, eating random mushrooms from the forest wasn't the best idea, as Arthur soon finds himself suffering from the worst case of diarrhea. After what feels like an eternity of misery, Arthur is exhausted and nearly ready to collapse, but Tessia keeps talking, sharing stories about how her grandfather used to read her tales of human and dwarven kingdoms. She's always dreamed of visiting them, but the elders discourage it, as elves generally don't trust other races. As she talks, Tessia notices that Arthur isn't really paying attention. He looks too pale to focus, so she gently drapes a blanket over him and quietly wishes him a good night. The next day, they continue their journey, but Arthur's chest pain is only getting worse with each step. Tessia feels helpless, unable to ease his pain, but Arthur reassures her that it's nothing to worry about. Trying to lighten the mood, she asks if she can call him Artie now that they've spent so much time together and become close friends. Arthur is fine with it, but Tessia is surprised by how nonchalant he is about it. He jokingly says that he'll cherish the fact that the great Lady Tessia considers him a friend now. That irritates her, and she tells him to stop being childish. Arthur retorts, teasing her about how she wouldn't let him leave her side the previous night because she was scared. Tessia insists that's a different situation entirely. Despite their bickering, Arthur realizes something. Tessie is the first real friend he's ever had. Not just in this life, but even in his past life, he never had anyone get this close to him. Just then, Tessia spots something ahead that catches her attention. She calls Arthur over to take a look. Expecting her to show him a strange rock or some cool stick, Arthur walks over. But instead, he finds himself standing in front of a massive tree with a glowing portal embedded in the trunk. Tessia turns to Arthur, gesturing to the entrance of her village and extending her hand, inviting him to follow her inside. However, as soon as Arthur steps into the elven village, he's immediately surrounded and faced with drawn swords. He glances at Tessia, hoping she'll vouch for him, but to his shock, she remains silent, staring at him with a cold expression. Arthur's heart sinks as he assumes Tessia has lured him into a trap to be killed. He curses himself for trusting anyone again, especially after all the betrayals he's suffered in his past life. As the guards prepare to execute him, Tessia watches in silence, and for a moment, Arthur believes she's complicit. But she wasn't behind any of this, she simply didn't speak up earlier. When she hears the guards planning to kill him, she finally steps forward and orders them to stop. One of the guards insists that Arthur is a threat, but Tessia stands firm, asserting that Arthur isn't dangerous. In fact, she owes her life to him. Her words should have been enough to stop the guards, but one accuses Arthur of manipulating her into trusting him and still wants to carry out the execution. Before the guard can act, a man appears in a magical light and commands the guards to release Arthur. This man is Virion, Tessia's grandfather and the former ruler of the elven tribe. Unlike the others, Virion remains calm and believes Tessia's account. He even apologizes to Arthur for their harsh treatment, explaining that they were suspicious due to Tessia's return with a human. Arthur, relieved to be spared, is also stunned to learn that Tessia is royalty. She never mentioned it during their entire journey together, and he wonders why she kept such an important detail to herself. Just then, Tessia's parents arrive, having been informed of their daughter's safe return. Tessia joyfully runs to embrace them, and it becomes clear that her parents are the king and queen of Eleanor. However, unlike Virion, they are not as understanding. As soon as Tessia's father sees Arthur, he demands an explanation for why a human is in his kingdom. He orders the guards to seize Arthur and execute him immediately. But no one moves, as Virion's orders still stand, and none of the guards dare defy him. Virian steps forward and informs the king that Arthur is the one who saved Tessia and escorted her home, and they cannot treat him as a criminal. Tessia insists that Arthur be treated as an honored guest in the palace, but her father hesitates. It is forbidden by tradition for humans to enter the elf kingdom, let alone the royal castle. Still, he begrudgingly agrees to give Arthur a proper welcome, rather than face Tessia's anger. With the misunderstanding resolved, preparations are made to return to the castle. Before they depart, Virian quietly asks Arthur if they can speak later in private. Arthur senses the weight of Virian's presence, realizing just how formidable the old man truly is. But with little time to ponder, Tessia eagerly grabs his arm and pulls him along, excited to show him around. This marks Arthur's first visit to the Elven Kingdom, and he's awestruck by how strikingly different it is from the human lands. However, the deep-seated prejudice toward humans is impossible to ignore. Every elf they pass stops to stare, making Arthur feel like an outsider as he walks beside Tessia toward the palace. Yet, no one dares speak out of line, as Arthur is officially recognized as a royal guest. Tessia is the only one treating him kindly, but Arthur can't help but wonder why it took her so long to speak up when the guards nearly executed him. Suddenly, a sharp, intense pain flares in Arthur's chest, more excruciating than before, but he still has no idea what's causing it. Upon arriving at the castle, Tessia is greeted by her attendants. She instructs them to treat Arthur with respect and kindness, regardless of his human status. After ensuring he's taken care of, she turns to Arthur, asking if he wants to play with her. Arthur, however, says he needs to speak with her parents first, figuring they'll want to know the full story of how Tessia was rescued and how they managed to return home. The group proceeds to the audience chamber, with Tessia refusing to be left behind. As they prepare for a serious discussion, Tessia suggests they bring in some treats to enjoy during the talk. What was about to be a tense conversation now feels more like a casual tea party, but the matters at hand are still critical. Tessia's father introduces himself formally as Alduin, the King of Eleanor, with his wife, Muriel, and his father, Vian, standing by his side. Arthur introduces himself humbly as a boy from a small village in Seapen, acknowledging that someone of his background, a human, would never normally be granted access to Eleanor or stand before the royal family. He expresses his sincere gratitude for their hospitality. Alduin raises an eyebrow, impressed by Arthur's maturity despite his youth, but his tone shifts to seriousness as he demands a full account of what happened to Tessia and how she went missing. Arthur recounts the story, detailing how he was separated from his family during a bandit raid and found himself lost in the Elven Forest, carefully leaving out his encounter with Sylvia in the cave. He continues, describing how he came across Tessia, who was being taken by slave traders. Alduin's face hardens in fury upon hearing this, but Arthur calmly points out that while humans are often blamed for the slave trade, elves have participated in it as well. Alduin says nothing, and Vian then asks Arthur how he managed to free Tessia from the traffickers. Arthur simply replies that he eliminated them all. One of the guards suddenly breaks his silence, blurting out that there's no way a child could have taken down slave traders single-handedly. Before he can say more, Vian cuts him off sharply, reminding him that unless he wants to lose his position, he'd better hold his tongue. Arthur's composure shows no signs of dishonesty, prompting Alduin, albeit reluctantly, to accept his account as truthful. With the situation now clarified, Arthur takes the chance to make a request. He explains once again that he was left stranded in the forest following the ambush and politely asks if they could assist him in returning to his homeland. The very idea of a human making such a request to the royal family of the elves causes Alduin to grit his teeth in frustration. However, considering Arthur ensured Tessia's safe return, it seems only fair to repay his act of goodwill. Refusing him would also mean dealing with Tessia's inevitable outburst, a situation Alduin has no desire to face. With a reluctant sigh, Alduin agrees to help, but he also informs Arthur that the teleportation gate leading to Sapin is currently inaccessible. It only opens once every 7 years during the summit of the 3 tribal leaders, and since the last summit occurred 2 years prior, the next activation won't happen for another 5 years. Arthur finds the delay unacceptable, and Alduin is equally unwilling to host a human in Eleanor for that long. So, he declares that a squad of guards will be arranged to escort Arthur home by land instead. Though he wants Arthur gone as soon as possible, the late hour persuades him to allow the boy to rest for the night within the palace, with plans to depart in the morning. Arthur expresses genuine appreciation for the assistance, though a growing ache in his chest causes him concern. Vian silently notes the discomfort Arthur is clearly trying to hide. Soon, preparations are made, and a room is provided for Arthur inside the castle. As he settles into a warm bath, the pain in his chest only worsens, igniting a flicker of worry that something more serious might be at play. Afterward, hoping fresh air might help, he steps onto the balcony. The cool breeze brings minor relief, but unease lingers. He realizes he'll need to address this issue soon before it becomes dangerous. While scanning the night sky, his eyes drift to another balcony above, where Tessia stands with her parents. The sight stirs memories of his own family. He still doesn't know if Rhea and Alice made it out alive after the ambush. Despite the uncertainty, he has faith in their strength, they've always been survivors. Still, he yearns deeply to see or hear from them. Tessia, noticing Arthur below and sensing something is off, waits until her discussion with her parents ends before seeking him out. Once she reaches him, she offers an apology for how coldly her father treated him. Arthur, however, waves it off, saying he understands. Given the long-standing tensions between humans and elves, Alduin's mistrust makes sense, especially when his daughter is involved. Their talk turns toward family again, and Arthur shares his growing anxiety that his parents might resent him. He fears they blame him for everything that's happened. After all, their journey was meant to benefit him. The guilt weighs heavily, especially since he failed to protect them and became separated. Before those thoughts can consume him further, Tessia gently grabs his face, shaking her head to snap him out of it. She doesn't know his parents, but if they're anything like hers, she believes without a doubt they'll be thrilled to see him again, safe and alive. The hallway was suddenly filled with the gentle glow of countless fireflies, surrounding Arthur like a soft, radiant cloud. In that moment, as he gazed at the lights, his thoughts drifted back to the smiles of his parents. Since his rebirth in this world, they had always shown him love and care. So why, in this moment, did he feel that they might despise him? The scars of his past life had begun to cloud his judgment, filling him with unwarranted doubts. He had even questioned Tessia's loyalty earlier, suspecting she might betray him. But now, as he looked at her, all he could see was a girl full of sincerity, someone who would never harm a friend. Suddenly, Arthur noticed something heading directly for Tessia. Reacting in an instant, he caught it with ease and infused his mana, preparing to strike whoever had dared to attack her. To his surprise, it was Virion who had launched the projectile. Arthur couldn't believe it, Virion, attempting to harm his own granddaughter? However, Virion explained calmly that he had no intention of hurting Tessia. The objects he'd thrown were merely harmless fireflies, even if they had made contact. Still, he was impressed by Arthur's lightning-fast reflexes. Virion's reason for the test was simple. He wanted to verify the strength Arthur had claimed to possess, the strength he had used to defeat the slave traders. And now it was clear that Arthur had not been exaggerating. Tessia rushed over, pleading with Virion to stop teasing Arthur, but Virion's true intention was not to mock him. He had noticed something odd about Arthur and wanted to test it further with a friendly duel to gauge his true abilities. With a wave of his hand, Virion conjured a sword for Arthur and gently moved Tessia to the side to ensure she was safe. Arthur accepted the challenge, charging forward with his blade in hand. He swung at Virion, but the older man was too swift. Even with his enhanced speed from mana, Arthur couldn't land a hit. As Arthur thought he saw an opening, Virion effortlessly shattered his sword with a simple gesture. A shard of the broken blade flew toward Tessia, and in a split second, Arthur threw the remains of his weapon to protect her. Without hesitation, he surged forward, wielding only his raw mana, yet Virion met him with an overwhelming aura of power. Virion's strength was far beyond Arthur's, leaving him with little chance of victory. But Arthur wasn't the type to back down. Despite being thrown back by Virion's force, Arthur pressed on, and in a rare moment, he landed a blow to Virion's forehead. It didn't cause harm, but Virion was genuinely impressed that Arthur had managed to slip through his defenses. Virion was eager for another round, but before they could continue, Tessia pinched him playfully and scolded him for picking on Arthur. Arthur reassured her that it was fine, even admitting that it felt like an honor to spar with someone as powerful as Virion. At that moment, Virion revealed his true purpose. He wanted to take Arthur as his pupil. Arthur was taken aback and asked if Virion was serious. Virion, never one for jokes, asked again, this time directly, would Arthur accept his offer. Arthur hesitated, unsure of what to say, especially since he still hadn't figured out how to contact his parents. Virion, sensing Arthur's concern, assured him that if that was the issue, he knew a way for Arthur to speak with his parents immediately. Arthur was intrigued, but before he could respond, a sharp pain suddenly pierced his chest. Virion, sensing the cause, explained that Arthur had inherited the will of a beast. Unless he accepted Virion's offer, the beast's power would eventually claim his life. And with that, episode comes to an end. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Arthur found himself frozen, unable to move a muscle. A stabbing pain shot through his chest, and as he tried to suppress it, a strange dark energy burst forth from within him. It morphed into a menacing figure, eerie and almost spectral in nature. Fear clenched his gut as he closed his eyes, uncertain if this entity was born from his own fears or the crushing weight of responsibility he carried. Just as the creature was about to strike, a gentle voice echoed through the chaos. It was Tessia. Her words somehow reached into him, easing the pain and grounding his heart. Arthur's eyes fluttered open to see Tessia sitting atop him. She greeted him cheerfully, wishing him good morning. Arthur, still groggy, waved her off and feigned sleep, jokingly calling her the monster from his nightmare. Tessia smirked but got straight to the point. Her grandfather was waiting outside. Arthur ignored her until she forcibly yanked him from bed, nagging him to fix his messy hair. He quipped back that her hair looked like a wild tangle, comparing her to a mythological creature. As Arthur began changing, Tessie asked whether he truly intended to stay. Arthur, half joking, half serious, replied that he hadn't decided yet, calling her princess. Tessia, clearly annoyed, reminded him for the umpteenth time not to use formal titles between friends and pinched his back as punishment. She warned him she'd lose it if he did it again. Arthur laughed it off, thinking she was already pretty angry, and wondered just how much worse it could get. Once dressed, Arthur followed Tessie outside the grand estate. Near the carriage, Alduin could be seen arguing with Virion, trying to persuade him not to let Arthur remain. Alduin and his wife Mariel clearly held strong bias against humans, a sentiment that wasn't exactly new. But Varian was unfazed, brushing off the protests and making it clear that his mind was made up. He trusted Arthur. Overhearing the exchange, Tessia stepped in to defend Arthur again, reminding them all that he had saved her life. Alduin responded tersely, admitting he was thankful, but not enough to accept a human into their sacred domain. Varian had heard enough. He silenced his son with authority, reminding him that even as king, Alduin lacked the wisdom to lead without prejudice. With that, he motioned for Arthur and Tessia to board the carriage. As the carriage rolled forward, Tessia dozed off against Arthur's shoulder. Varian noticed and told Arthur to let her rest, explaining she'd woken early due to the significance of the day. It would determine Arthur's path moving forward. He then sighed, confiding that Tessia had lived an isolated life. Despite being surrounded by people, she had no real friends. Everyone who approached her had tried to use her in some way. That's why she'd grown wary, keeping her distance from others. After hearing everything, Arthur finally understands why Tessia gets upset whenever he refers to her formally as princess. Varian shares that Tessia only truly smiles when she's with Arthur, and expresses his gratitude to Arthur for being such a close friend to her. This makes Arthur realize just how much Tessia values their bond. Seeing Varian's warm and genuine nature, Arthur feels he can fully trust the elderly man from now on. Not long after, the carriage pulls up to their destination, stopping in front of a peculiar home that reminds Arthur of something straight out of a fantasy tale. He wonders about the occupant of such an unusual place and what kind of person could be important enough to warrant a personal visit from a former king. To Arthur's surprise, the usually regal Varian drops his royal demeanor and begins pounding his foot on the door, calling out to the occupant, a woman, by referring to her as an old witch. When there's no response, Varian presses his ear to the door, only to be suddenly launched backward as the door swings open forcefully. A cranky old woman stands there, scolding him for yelling when she could hear him just fine. Picking himself up, Varian introduces her to Arthur and Tessia as Renia Darkassin. He explains that she's a talented mage, one capable of helping Arthur with his request. Arthur, relieved and respectful, expresses how honored he is to meet someone of her caliber. Renia appreciates his manners and welcomes them inside. Once in, Arthur scans the room but sees nothing beyond a plain bucket filled with water. Curious, he asks how she intends to help him reach his parents without any magical tools or equipment in sight. Renia explains that she's a seer, a rare type of mage who can glimpse into moments of the past and future. She attempts to use her powers on Arthur, only to be startled by how little she can actually see, remarking that he is unique. Arthur clarifies that he doesn't want to see the future, he just wants a way to send a message to his parents and let them know he's okay. Understanding his wish, Renia tells him to look into the water's reflection and concentrate on his parents. As Arthur follows her instructions, she casts her magic, allowing him to glimpse into the lives of his mother, Alice, and his father, Ray. Arthur sees them sitting together, quietly eating lunch, their eyes still full of sadness. Today is Arthur's birthday, and they're both still grieving the son they lost. Ray, who now works as part of the city's security force, lives with Alice in a mansion, caring for her and the child she's expecting. As emotions overwhelm them, Arthur speaks, his voice reaching through the magic. He reassures them that he is alive and safe in the land of the elves. Though he can't come home yet due to something affecting his body, he promises he'll recover and return. He urges them to stop blaming themselves for what happened and assures them that he's doing everything he can to be strong. After ending the call, expressing his love to both of his parents, Alice embraces Ray tightly, overwhelmed with joy that their son is alive and well. Arthur notices the emotional toll this has taken on his family, his father's eyes glistening with tears, and makes a silent vow to grow stronger so they never have to suffer like this again. With resolve in his heart, he asks Varian to become his mentor. However, Arthur's journey to training isn't without resistance. The idea of him living in the elven city stirs unease, especially for Alduin and Mariel. Having a human in their midst isn't something that brings comfort to many. To address the matter, Varian and Tessia go to speak with Alduin again. Tessia defends Arthur passionately. She reminds her father that this boy, whom they now hesitate to welcome, has saved her life not once but twice. She argues that turning him away would only show that elves repay kindness with hostility. Alduin remains unmoved, insisting that the well-being of his people takes precedence, and he doubts they will accept a human among them. Varian steps in as well. Though he has never taken on a student before, he assures Alduin that asking Arthur to become his disciple was not a decision made lightly. Varian's belief in Arthur should speak volumes. Torn between his daughter, his father, and his duties as a ruler, Alduin finally agrees to let Arthur remain. Still, Alduin voices one lingering concern: how the rest of the elves will react. He asks who will take responsibility if something goes wrong. Without hesitation, Varian says he will. Satisfied, Alduin and Mariel step outside to officially greet Arthur. Alduin addresses Arthur directly, acknowledging his prior harshness. He explains that it wasn't personal, it was the result of deeply rooted prejudice toward humans. Arthur notices a visible shift in Alduin's demeanor. The same man who had once rejected him now offers a sincere welcome. Alduin's affection for his family clearly drives his actions. He extends his hand to Arthur in a rare show of acceptance. But Tessia decides to take it further. She proposes to her father that if he's truly at peace with Arthur staying, he should allow her to take Arthur into the city for a proper tour. Given that the entire city likely already knows of Arthur's extended stay, Alduin sees no reason to refuse. Tessia beams and grabs Arthur's hand, eagerly leading him through the city. Arthur is captivated by his first real glimpse of the elven capital. The people, their attire, and their customs are all new to him. Tessia excitedly points out a popular shop known for its fruits and snacks, urging him to hurry so they can beat the crowd. As they make their way there, an elf deliberately bumps into Arthur. Being polite by nature, Arthur brushes it off and apologizes, but the young elf sneers at him in disgust. The boy hurls a comment, claiming that Arthur's human presence has defiled him. He continues, stating that no matter how much Virion wants Arthur in their city, he'll never be truly accepted, because to them, he's just a human. Normally, Arthur wouldn't dream of acting out in a playful way here, but ever since spending time with Tessia, he's picked up a few childish traits, and now seems like the perfect moment to let them shine. When another boy approaches, warning Tessia that hanging around someone like Arthur could tarnish her image, Arthur listens with mild amusement. The boy introduces himself as Faereth Ifsar, proudly revealing his noble background, and promptly offers to escort Tessia home. Tessia immediately calls him out on how inappropriate that was, but Arthur has something far more entertaining in mind. With a mocking bow, he purposefully mispronounces Faereth's name as Ivysaur, twisting it into something embarrassing. Tessia quickly catches onto his joke and can't help but laugh, while Faereth clearly realizes he's being ridiculed. Trying to save face, and clearly offended, Faereth throws down a challenge, a duel. It's an unusual demand in the middle of the city, and the surrounding adults all pause to witness what's about to unfold. Turning it down would mean Arthur is admitting defeat and would shame both Viron's name and even the royal family, so despite Tessia's insistence that it's unnecessary, Arthur accepts. Faereth smugly asks Tessia to act as referee, and the match is set. Charging in with confidence, Faereth tries to prove himself. But Arthur lands a single strike that knocks the noble flat, his eyes rolling as he crashes to the ground. Tessia shows no surprise. She had warned him earlier that Arthur wasn't to be underestimated, and since he ignored her, she figures he got what he deserved. Without skipping a beat, Tessia grabs Arthur's hand and urges him to flee the scene with her. He laughs and runs beside her. As days pass, Arthur becomes more comfortable with Tessia and enjoys being around her. They start spending more time together, sharing meals, going on outings, and even reading side by side. Whenever an elf tries to mess with him, Tessia is there in an instant to back him up. After one of their outings, she stands by a railing and chats with him. His official training is set to begin the next day, and she's curious about how he feels. She notices something off in his expression and gently asks if something's bothering him, maybe he's doubting whether he still wants to go through with it. Arthur recalls a recent talk with Viron. During that conversation, Viron reminded him how alone he really is in this unfamiliar land, no family, no close allies. Still, Arthur chose to stay and grow stronger here. But Viron made one thing clear, the path ahead will not be easy. What lay ahead would test him more than anything he had ever faced. Still, he understood that enduring the trials and learning from them would shape his future. Viron gave him one final chance to walk away, asking if he truly wanted to continue. He confirmed that he did. Viron told him to ignore the ache in his mana core for the time being. Then, turning toward Tessia with a spark of energy, he expressed his excitement about beginning their training the next day. He admitted that while he'd been through many difficult moments, even fighting alongside his father, none of it could compare to what he was now preparing for. Yet, he remained confident that he would rise to the challenge. Tessia extended her hand as well, pledging to give it her all. He was momentarily confused. What exactly did she mean? Tessia clarified with a grin, she would do her absolute best not to fall behind and to match him step for step. She didn't want him to get too far ahead. He smiled, silently accepting the challenge. The next morning marked the official start of their training. Standing before Viron, he listened carefully as the path ahead was laid out. As the training began, he reflected on how life in the Elven Kingdom moved at a different pace, faster, more intense. Though he'd only been here a short while, he was already learning and evolving. He had chosen to remain, believing it was the right path to secure his destiny. Even though the details of his journey were still unclear, one thing was certain, he believed in the brightness of his future. I genuinely hope the best for him and can't wait to see where this journey leads. Time passed, and even Tessia had made great strides in her mana control. One morning, she came to wake Arthur, who wouldn't get up at first, so she used a little magic to do it. Startled, he shouted in protest, asking why she didn't wake him more gently. She just grinned, knowing full well that she had tried that first. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for the next part. Arthur and Tessia step outside just in time to see Viron heading off for a scheduled gathering. Arthur's curiosity is piqued as he wonders about the nature of this meeting, but Tessia quickly shifts his focus, proudly revealing that she's made him a burger. Before he can even respond, she makes it clear she expects proper appreciation for the effort she put in. While eating, Arthur mischievously downplays the burger by calling it bang average, clearly trying to rile her up, and it works. After their light-hearted breakfast, the two make their way to the training grounds where they begin some unarmed sparring under Varian's watchful eye. Eventually, he hands them wooden swords to raise the challenge, and Arthur continues to poke fun by calling Tessia a pretty little princess. Tessia, amused but competitive, vows to beat some humility into him. As the two grow more comfortable with their wooden blades, Varian shifts gears and begins to introduce a deeper lesson. This time, on the fundamentals of mana. Varian explains that in this world, when someone awakens mana, they typically align with one of 4 core elements: fire, water, wind, or earth. These affinities often depend on racial traits. Elves usually bond with wind, while other races lean toward earth or water. Dwarfs, in particular, demonstrate strong proficiency in both fire and earth. Humans, however, are known for their flexible potential with all 4, though it's limited to a single affinity per individual, and that affinity is determined randomly. There are rare exceptions, borderline myths, where a human can tap into more than one element. Based on the subtle hints, it seems likely Arthur may fall into that category. Tessia then raises a question about why Arthur hasn't trained his body while using mana the way she has. Varian explains that Arthur's current weakness stems from a conflict within. A beast will residing in his mana core that's throwing off the balance between his physical form and magical abilities. This internal imbalance is what's causing Arthur's recurring chest pain. He quietly wonders whether this beast will is connected to Sylvia, but knows he doesn't have enough evidence to be sure yet. Varian tells them that they'll need a deeper understanding of Arthur's condition before they can help. Tessie playfully asks if the pain flares up whenever she lands a solid hit during training, and Arthur admits she does hit pretty hard. He then explains Tessia's recent power boost. Turns out elves typically awaken mana by age 10, and Tessia, being 9, has just gone through that awakening. The sudden burst of power even caused her to accidentally destroy her bedroom in her sleep, which Arthur finds eerily similar to his own early mana awakening, where he wrecked his family's home as a baby. That's also why Tessia has been able to keep up with him in training now. She's developing fast and learning alongside him. During one of their training sessions, Varian decides it's time for Arthur to awaken the latent force within him, his primal bond. To help Arthur take this major step, Varian tells him that if the ritual is successful, it will free him from the constant pain he endures and mark his true beginning as a bonded warrior. Curious and hopeful, Arthur agrees and prepares for the process. Varian explains that the ritual starts by igniting a spark within Arthur's magical core. Reassuring him that the sensation will only be mildly warm, Varian channels his own energy into Arthur, but something unexpected is triggered. Arthur cries out in pain as a surge of power erupts from within him, sending both Varian and Tessia hurtling backward. Once the process finishes, Arthur collapses. Alarmed but understanding what's unfolding, Varian quickly carries him back to the castle and waits patiently until Arthur regains consciousness. When Arthur wakes, Varian gently asks about the entity he connected with. Arthur vaguely mentions that the force inside him seemed to be that of a dragon. Having already suspected this, Varian becomes grave. He warns Arthur to never reveal this secret to others. Such a rare and powerful bond would make him a target for those with dangerous intentions. Now that the bond has been awakened, Varian informs Arthur that he will be returning home in 4 months, which surprises him, as he had believed his training would last 2 more years. Varian explains that a special internation exchange is planned by the Allied Realms, and a portal to Xyrus City, where Arthur's parents live, will be opened then. Arthur is moved upon realizing that the meeting Varian attended recently was actually to secure this opportunity for him. Touched, he reflects on what it means to be returning home, and how Tessia might react. Varian reassures him, saying that Tessie already knows thanks to her parents. That night, Arthur quietly speaks to the mysterious egg he's kept close, sharing his thoughts about leaving. To his shock, the egg begins to glow. As it hatches, Arthur watches in awe and slight fear, as a small, cat-like dragon emerges. Instantly charmed by its appearance, Arthur's joy is short-lived when the creature bites his arm. However, the bite is not hostile. It creates a magical seal that allows him to hear the dragon's voice, which is an adorable mess of incoherent sounds. Still, Arthur is grateful for the connection and names her Sylvie, after his mother figure, Sylvia, while pondering the purpose of the seal on his arm. Amused and overwhelmed, he jokes to himself about becoming a parent at 8 years old, likening his situation to another life from a different world. Exhausted, he falls asleep with Sylvie curled beside him. Her arrival is sure to stir reactions among those around him, especially Tessia, given her vibrant personality. Morning comes swiftly, and as usual, Tessie bursts in to wake Arthur. A heavy sleeper, he barely stirs. When she removes his blanket, she's met with an unexpected sight: Sylvie. Her shriek is loud enough to startle Arthur awake, but to his surprise, it's not a scream of fear. Tessia is thrilled by the sight of the tiny creature. She holds him gently, cradling him as one would a child. Together, they make their way toward the training grounds to meet Varian. Along the path, Tessia tries everything she can to win over Slyvi, coaxing and reaching out in hopes the little creature will come to her. But this companion, no, this beast, shows affection only to its true master. Upon reaching the training area, Varian isn't surprised. He immediately guesses the situation, asking if this is the result of the beast will merging, to which Arthur confirms with a nod. As Arthur gazes at Sly, his expression darkens with concern, worried about how such a being might be received in society. Though Arthur doesn't speak his concern aloud, Virion catches on and reassures him. A dragon? No one would believe it anyway. They'll simply claim it's a rare mana beast. With that settled, training begins. Now that Arthur has tapped into beast mana, Virion says the next step is to train it effectively. And what better method than through combat? Virion transforms into his own spirit beast. The resulting form is terrifying, its presence, aura, and the very shadows it emits overwhelm the onlookers. The children are visibly shaken. To intensify matters, Virion instructs Arthur to fight him in that form. Fight? Arthur can hardly fathom it. He can't track the beast at all, it vanishes and reappears at will. Defeated before he can even act, Arthur concedes. When Virion returns to his elven self, he explains that the form he took is called the Shadow Panther. This creature masters both sound and light manipulation, making it nearly impossible to detect. As formidable as it is, maintaining the form is exhausting. Done toying with Arthur, Virion pulls out a training staff to continue lessons the old-fashioned way. Time passes, days blur into weeks, possibly even months. Arthur diligently sharpens both his mana control and beast will. His strength grows, and eventually, he becomes capable of standing against the Shadow Panther. All the while, the date of the upcoming gate's opening approaches. Tessia begins to feel the strain of his looming departure. A celebration is held in the city before the exchange, yet she can't enjoy it. Her close friend is leaving, and it weighs on her. Arthur encourages her to smile, trying to ease the moment. While walking through the city, a boy collides with him and gives him a strange look, probably because Arthur is human. That boy turns out to be Faereth. Remember him? He's the same elf who once challenged Arthur to a duel and lost after a single strike. He walks up, asking if Arthur remembers him. Arthur honestly replies that he doesn't. Can you blame him? Faereth didn't leave much of an impression. The boy tries to refresh his memory and then declares he's ready for a rematch, sure that this time, he'll win. The outcome? Just like before, Arthur strikes, and Faereth is down again. Tessie reminds Arthur of who the boy is, prompting Arthur to extend a hand in greeting. Surprisingly, Faereth accepts it. All he ever wanted, he says, was to be Arthur's friend. He was disappointed when Arthur never offered friendship before. They talk for a bit, and Arthur learns Faereth will also be participating in the exchange program. Faereth adds that all noble children will be attending. He's unaware of her decision since Tessia hasn't mentioned anything yet. He glances her way to ask if she'll be joining, but Faereth interrupts, saying she won't, claiming they wouldn't want their delicate princess getting lost again. Delicate? That's definitely not the right word for Tessia, especially given how powerful she truly is. Naturally, hearing that lights a spark in her. She decides to prove him wrong, launching a punch that sends Faereth soaring into the air, crashing down like a ball bouncing off a castle wall. He loses consciousness instantly. I've never witnessed a royal strike their own subordinate before. That's a first. As the situation escalates, Arthur quickly grabs her and pulls her away. Once they're alone, he cautions her that a princess should maintain her image and not lash out at her people. But she couldn't care less, her mind is overloaded, especially now that Arthur is leaving and Faereth just walked into his own blunder. She vents her frustration, accusing Arthur of abandoning her and acting like her father, lecturing her. In irritation, she calls him an old man and storms off. She rushes to her room and breaks down in tears. Later, realizing how upset she is, Arthur quietly climbs through her window, bellflowers in hand. She notices him standing there and walks up to him. He gently tucks a bellflower behind her ear and invites her to come outside. Ignoring the warnings about the woods, they venture in together. There, Arthur lights a small fire for warmth. They sit side by side and begin to talk. Sleep starts to take her, but she fights it, wanting to stay close to him a bit longer. As they talk about life back in the human realm, she finally dozes off beside him. Morning arrives, and it's time for Arthur to depart. Varian hands him a compass to help him navigate, pointing out the Aralith insignia on it, an emblem that would guide him back should he ever return. He also slyly hints that he knows about Arthur's night with Tessia. Just before leaving, Arthur asks if Tessia is around but assumes she's too upset to show up. Then, just as he prepares to step into the portal with the others, Tessia runs toward him, calling his name, and even trips along the way. She clings to him tightly, reminding him to eat properly when he's back home. He hugs her back, telling her he'll miss her. Through tears, she says she'll miss him too. The portal shimmers open. It's an emotional farewell. After a long journey, Arthur returns to the human kingdom. Arriving at Xyrus, he feels joy knowing he'll soon see his family. He walks to his home, steadies himself, and knocks on the door. A little girl rushes over and opens it. He stares at the tiny girl before him, instantly realizing it's his sister. His parents appear, calling out the girl's name, Eleanor. They freeze in shock when they see who's standing there. Arthur smiles and simply says he's back. As they look on in disbelief, the son they thought they lost has finally returned. The following day, Arthur arrives in Xyrus City and is finally reunited with his family. To his surprise, he learns he now has a younger sister named Eleanor. Apparently, Alice and Ray have been telling her stories about Arthur for years, so she's thrilled to finally meet the brother she's only heard about. Once they're inside and settled, Alice immediately asks Arthur how he's been holding up. The last time they communicated, Arthur mentioned he was unwell, so she's understandably anxious and wants to know if he truly recovered. He reassures her that he's doing much better now and there's nothing to worry about. Still, knowing they deserve to understand what happened, Arthur begins to share everything that occurred since they were separated. He leaves out sensitive details like his encounter with Sylvia and the inheritance of her beast will, focusing instead on his friendship with Tessia and his time recovering in the Elf Kingdom. Despite his reassurances, Alice still appears uneasy and voices her concern again, saying that if his condition were to return, there wouldn't be much they could do in their current circumstances. Arthur tries to ease her worries, telling her the issue won't resurface. Since he can't be upfront about the beast will, he creates a cover story that his earlier illness was a result of awakening his mana core prematurely, which led to instability. Though it doesn't sit well with him to mislead his parents, Arthur believes it's best to wait until he's strong enough to handle the potential fallout from the full truth. At that moment, Ree notices Sylvia and asks about her origins. Arthur keeps his cool and claims he found her in a mana beast's den and decided to adopt her. Eleanor is instantly captivated by Sylvia, and the two quickly form a bond. But Ree isn't done with his questions. He stands up and asks Arthur about the current level of his mana core. Alice immediately scolds him, thinking it's unfair to put pressure on Arthur so soon after his return, but Ree insists he just wants to see how much his son has grown. Arthur doesn't mind and is about to answer, but he first flips the question, wondering how Ree managed to afford such a comfortable home. Ree chuckles and explains that he works tirelessly as a security trainer for the Hellsea auction house, and his mana core has now reached the dark orange stage. Arthur is genuinely impressed. Orange is a high-level mana core, and with the scale going from black to white, the lighter the color, the more powerful the core. Ree's always had an unconventional approach to training, emphasizing physical conditioning, but Arthur didn't expect him to have advanced so far in mana cultivation as well. Pleased with his own progress, Ree turns the question back to Arthur. Arthur responds that his core is currently at the light red stage, and Ree immediately bursts out swearing upon realizing Arthur is just one step away from overtaking him. Unfortunately, he forgets Eleanor is still in the room, and she promptly starts running around repeating all the colorful language she just heard. Ree still can't believe Arthur's nearly caught up to him in strength, and there's no way he's letting that slide. He throws down a challenge for a sparring match in the garden, right then and there. Arthur agrees without missing a beat, but before they can head out, the living room doors swing open and Vincent strides in, asking if Ree's kid has come back yet. Ree introduces him as Vincent Helsty, the owner of the auction house where Ray works, so in short, Ray's boss. Vincent and his wife, Tabitha, are eager to finally meet Arthur since they've heard plenty about him. Arthur greets them with polite formality, which already wins Vincent over. There's no way those manners came from Ray. Then Vincent and Tabitha bring in their daughter, Lilia. She's a bit reserved at first, but the second her eyes land on Sylvie perched on Arthur's shoulder, she lights up. She asks if she can pet Sylvie, and after Arthur gives the okay, she practically melts, cuddling the little dragon like it's the most adorable creature she's ever seen. While she's doting on Sylvie, Ray quietly tells Arthur to be mindful, not to go around breaking things since technically, Vincent owns the place. Vincent tenses at the mention of damage, and his concern only grows when he hears Ree and Arthur plan to go all out in the garden. Everyone heads outside to watch the duel, but Vincent can't help but voice his doubts. Can a kid like Arthur really be at the light red core level? Alice, who knows her son better than anyone, reassures him. Arthur's always been a quick study, and it's not like he has anything to gain by pretending. Tabitha just tells Vincent to calm down and enjoy the fight. What nobody realizes, though, is that Arthur could have advanced to the orange stage long ago, but his training with his beast will meant he had to leave his mana core untouched. Now, though, he's ready to show off, and he's got a few new tricks he's been waiting to unleash. The match kicks off with immediate intensity, blow for blow. Arthur and Ree clash, and Ree's impressed by how far Arthur's come. Still, Ree keeps the edge in raw physical strength. After a few sharp exchanges, they break apart, and Ree grins, saying it's time to take things up a notch. He ignites his hand in flames and warns Arthur he still has time to back out. In this world, every mage has a natural leaning toward a specific element. For conjurers, controlling their element comes easy, but for augmenters, it's tougher, at least until they reach a certain tier. Once they do, they can discover their elemental affinity and use it to supercharge their physical abilities. Ree's resistance to fire-based attacks makes the battle much harder, so Arthur decides it's time to get serious. He starts channeling raw mana directly into his arms. When they collide again, the gap between them narrows, but Ree's overwhelming force still sends Arthur flying. Still, all the combat experience Arthur retained from his previous life made his training under Virion incredibly efficient. He had already mastered fire magic early, and once he did, Virion pushed him to go further, beyond ordinary elemental manipulation. Arthur concentrates his mana once more, and this time, sparks crackle along his limbs as he begins generating lightning. Ree is taken aback. He didn't expect Arthur to be using a high-tier variant of fire magic, but Arthur isn't stopping there. While maintaining the lightning, he also draws water from a nearby fountain, curving it stealthily behind Ree to strike from an unexpected angle. Ree barely deflects it in time, but now he's completely stunned. Arthur is handling both fire and water magic at the same time. Overflowing with pride, Ree pulls Arthur into a hug, asking where he learned such skills and if he's hiding even more abilities. Arthur admits he only recently started experimenting with lightning and still has a long way to go in mastering it, but he's making steady progress. That's when Eleanor comes running onto the field to check on them both, while Vincent and Tabitha remain frozen on the sidelines, utterly speechless. Because really, no average child could ever accomplish what Arthur just demonstrated. That evening, everyone gathers for dinner, and Vincent keeps raving about Arthur's performance. Ree laughs, saying his known Arthur was special ever since he awakened his mana at age 3. Vincent nearly spits out his drink, because that's just unheard of. Most mags don't awaken until around 8. Then again, they also don't typically demolish their homes during the process. Ree can't help but burst into laughter at the memory, though he ends up tipping back in his chair from laughing too hard. Right after, Vincent rises and suggests Arthur should apply to Xyrus Academy. Ree hadn't really considered it before. Xyrus usually caters to elite and well-connected mags. But Tabitha agrees with Vincent and says they'd even cover Arthur's tuition, convinced his talent will take him far. Alice looks unsure, since their families already received so much from them. And now they want to pay for Arthur's education too. Plus, Arthur's just 8, and Xyrus typically only accepts students starting at 10. But Vincent's already ahead of the game. He explains that he personally knows the academy's director due to his line of work, and if he talks to her, he's confident he can secure a special exemption for Arthur. Before any decisions are made, though, Arthur finally speaks up. He points out that it would have been appreciated if someone had actually asked for his input before making such a big decision. Today is the first time he's been reunited with his family, and he'd like the chance to enjoy that before anyone starts talking about sending him off to school. With that, he rises from the table and starts wandering through the corridors, though admittedly, he's still not too familiar with the layout of this place. A moment later, Lilia calls out and warns him that if he keeps going in that direction, he'll end up getting lost in the basement. She offers to show him a better route, and with nothing else on his plate, Arthur agrees and follows her. She brings him to one of the lounge areas where the household staff usually relax. Everyone there immediately greets Lilia, since she's a frequent visitor. Even though Arthur only just arrived today, they already know who he is, especially after he accidentally torched the garden during his earlier sparring match with Ray. Arthur apologizes for the trouble, but no one seems upset. Lilia then asks Maria if there's any leftover duck, and there is, but Maria jokingly tells her to watch how much she eats, teasing that she's been putting on a few pounds lately. One of the maids then quietly tells Arthur that Lilia often drops by when she's feeling overwhelmed. Her parents have been pushing her hard to awaken as a mage, subjecting her to constant training. While Lilia does genuinely want to master magic, the unrelenting pressure builds up, and sometimes she just needs to catch her breath away from it all. Later that night, Arthur spends some peaceful moments with his parents, who are still overjoyed to have their son back. Although he looks quite different now from the last time they saw him, they know deep down he's still the same child they raised. With his potential, it's obvious he's destined to be a great mage one day, but even if he wasn't, their love for him wouldn't change. As much as they'd love to keep talking, they know Arthur must be exhausted, so they rise to say goodnight. Before they leave, though, Ray pauses to touch on what Vincent mentioned earlier. He admits it might have seemed a little forceful, but everything Vincent said came from a place of genuine care. And to be clear, no one's going to make Arthur attend the academy unless it's something he truly wants. The next morning, Arthur rushes downstairs when he hears some familiar voices. The Twin Horns group heard the news about his return and came by to check on him. Arthur is thrilled to see them again, but Angela is even more excited. She immediately wraps him up in a massive, heartfelt hug. After Angela finally releases him, Arthur shifts his focus to the rest of the group. But before he can say much, Jasmine approaches and begins gently checking him over. It might look odd from the outside, but she's simply making sure he didn't come away with any lasting wounds. Once she's satisfied that he's okay, she pulls him into a brief, heartfelt hug and apologizes. The guilt of not being able to protect him when he got separated from the group still lingers, so seeing him safe now is a huge relief. Soon after, everyone settles down and starts reconnecting. Arthur is surprised to learn that the Twin Horns had been staying in the city of Atiston for a while. They had picked up a decent contract there but had to return to the capital due to another assignment. Listening to their adventures makes Arthur realize how little he really knows about the kingdom of Sappan, or Dikafan as a whole. The idea of becoming an adventurer seems like an amazing way to explore the world, but it also comes with the reality of leaving his loved ones again. And he's not sure he's ready for that. Thanks for watching. Please like, share and subscribe for the next episode. A few days go by, and we find Arthur in his room, focused on refining his control over his beast will. During his training, he makes a shocking discovery: he can momentarily stop time. The catch? He can only hold it for a few seconds, and each use leaves him utterly drained. This leads him to question whether it's worth putting himself through this much strain for an ability he barely grasps. But then he remembers his purpose: to protect those he cares about. That's enough to push him forward. Before anything else, though, he realizes Syl reeks. Without hesitation, he scoops her up and brings her to get cleaned. She's not thrilled about bath time, but Arthur isn't about to let her foul up their lavish surroundings. Speaking of which, with the Helsty estate being so grand and luxurious, Arthur figures the auction house tied to it must be making serious money. That said, he doesn't actually know much about their operations. After giving Syl a proper cleaning, he's drying her off on his bed when his family shows up, reminding him that he could use some freshening up himself. During his stay in the Elf Kingdom, he never paid much attention to his appearance, but that changes when his mother drags him to her preferred salon. The stylist promises a transformation, but in reality, Arthur just ends up with a neater version of his usual look. Still, everyone insists he looks way more presentable now. Arthur finds it odd that they care so much about how he looks, until Tabitha tells him they're taking him to their auction house. Since it's a high-profile venue frequented by royalty, they can't have him showing up looking like he just walked out of the forest. Already being in Terror City, she offers to take him around for a bit, and Eleanor eagerly jumps in, wanting to spend time with her big brother. Lilia, who used to be Eleanor's go-to companion before Arthur returned, feels a little sidelined, but she brushes it off because she wants to be around Arthur too. They all end up having a fun day together, playing games and joking around by a statue where they try ring toss. Out of nowhere, some random guys hurl a ring at Arthur's head and stroll off like it's nothing. Arthur's baffled and asks Lilia what that was about. The guy seemed way too smug. She explains they're students from Cyrus Academy, and because of their uniforms, people around here treat them like they're some kind of aristocracy. Arthur's annoyed. He hoped to escape this kind of elitism, but he decides to let it go for now. Not long after, he picks up on a weird energy coming from a nearby shop and heads over to investigate. His parents tell him it's a place affiliated with the Beast Corps. Arthur is completely taken aback. He had no idea that Beast Cores could be bought or sold. Back in the elf lands, that kind of trade just didn't exist, but apparently, it's commonplace in the human territories. Tabitha explains that beast cores can significantly enhance a mage's strength, and those containing a beast's will can fetch up to 100 gold coins on the market. To put that in perspective, that amount of gold could support Arthur's entire family in comfort for more than 200 years. She adds that their auction house will be featuring some beast cores soon and even offers to let Arthur examine one if he's curious. Arthur politely declines, saying he's satisfied with the core Sylvia gave him. That's when Lilia suddenly chimes in, asking her mother if she can get one too. Tabitha immediately shoots down the idea, pointing out that beast cores aren't magical shortcuts to awakening. On top of that, she says they're far too expensive for someone Lilia's age. Lilia tries to argue her case, but Tabitha stands firm and ends the discussion. Later on, the group stops at a small cafe to grab a meal, but Arthur notices Lilia hasn't shaken her frustration. Based on what Tabitha said earlier, it's clear she wants Lilia to awaken naturally and not rush the process, but Lilia's behavior suggests she's feeling pressured or impatient for some reason. Arthur's about to ask what's going on, but when he glances around, he realizes Lilia has disappeared. Even though she had been sitting right next to her mother, Tabitha doesn't seem the least bit alarmed by her sudden absence, even when Lilia wanders off into a sketchy-looking side street. Arthur quickly gets up to follow her, tracking her to a modest-looking magic shop. Inside, Lilia is eyeing a lower-end beast core on display. It looks like she might just have enough pocket money to buy it, but before she can make a move, Arthur steps in and asks if she's really thought it through. He reminds her that owning a beast core doesn't automatically grant magical powers. Lilia shrugs off his concern, insisting she won't know unless she tries. She reaches for the core, but Arthur gently catches her hand, suggesting she think it over more carefully. Lilia pulls away, frustrated, telling him he'll never understand what she's dealing with, not when everything seems to come so easily to him. As she moves back, she accidentally bumps into someone standing behind her, and it turns out to be one of those ex-Iris delinquents they encountered before. She quickly apologizes, saying it was an accident, but the guy clearly isn't the forgiving type. His crew starts getting ready to stir up trouble. The noise draws the attention of the store's owner, who comes out to investigate, but the moment he spots their academy uniforms, he retreats without a word, clearly wanting no part in what's about to go down. With no one to stop them, the ex-Iris thugs decide it's open season, and their first targets are Arthur and Lilia. Lilia instantly ducks behind Arthur, and though he'd hoped to avoid a public confrontation, it's clear these guys aren't interested in a peaceful chat. He braces to shut them down, but just before things escalate, Tabitha and Alice arrive on the scene, firmly demanding that everyone stop using magic immediately. The boys try to brush her off, demanding to know who she thinks she is. Even the shopkeeper rushes out in a panic, pleading with Tabitha not to provoke them, warning they could destroy the store if they felt like it. But Tabitha holds her ground, declaring that if any of them so much as touches the daughter of the Helsty family, they'll regret it. Once the name clicks, panic spreads through the group. The Helsty family is one of the Academy's top sponsors, and if word gets back to the director, they'll be expelled without question. The group quickly backs off and bolts, not wanting to push their luck. Still, one of them throws out a final insult, calling Lilia a spoiled waste, before storming away. Later, everyone returns home and brings Vincent up to speed. He's shocked that things nearly exploded into a brawl with Academy students, but ultimately relieved Tabitha showed up when she did, because with Arthur involved, things could have gotten ugly fast. Lilia quietly apologizes for the trouble, but Vincent reassures her that she didn't do anything wrong. With everything her family's done for the Academy, this won't affect her application. Vincent even tells Arthur there's nothing to worry about either, but Lilia misinterprets it, assuming her father is suggesting Arthur should replace her. Her parents try to clear up the misunderstanding, but she's too overwhelmed by her insecurities and snaps, accusing them of thinking she's a failure. She shouts that she hates them and storms out, leaving the room in silence. Hours pass, and as dinner approaches, Arthur goes to find her, only to discover her room is empty. Vincent had once filled her childhood with stories about the Academy, and Lilia had been excited for years. That anticipation slowly turned to frustration as she waited for her mana to awaken, far longer than anyone had expected. Her parents always told her not to worry, but watching Arthur develop magic so easily made her feel like she was being left behind. Arthur eventually finds her in the staff lounge, sitting alone. He wants to comfort her, but he hesitates, afraid of saying the wrong thing and making it worse. Before he can speak, Lilia quietly admits she's sorry for being jealous. Seeing Arthur's talent draw so much attention from her father hurt, not because she blames Arthur, but because it made her feel like she wasn't enough. Arthur understands all too well what it means to struggle with self-worth, so he gently holds her cheeks and tells her honestly, she is not a failure. He's seen how much effort she's been putting in, and he knows her parents recognize it too. They're proud of her, and someone like him, no matter how powerful, isn't going to take that away. Lilia laughs suddenly, realizing how silly her worries have been. Her father only wants her to become a mage because he believes it will bring her joy. That's why he's been spending so much to help her get into the Academy. She understands that her parents don't want her to push herself too hard, but with everything Vincent does behind closed doors, it just makes her seem like a spoiled rich girl in the eyes of others. Arthur understands how she feels and offers a solution. He asks her if learning magic is something she truly wants. If it is, then he knows a way to speed up the process. That night, Arthur tells her parents she's left the house, and they're stunned. They immediately ask for an explanation, and Arthur says he sent her away to train, to give her a chance to awaken her magic. To ease their fears, he assures them she's in good hands with people he trusts. Still, Vincent and Tabitha demand to know why he made such a big decision without consulting them first. Arthur explains it wasn't his choice alone, Lilia wanted it this way. If she had stayed to say goodbye, her emotions might have held her back. But she didn't leave without saying anything. She left a letter, and Arthur hands it to her anxious father. In it, Lilia writes that she's always felt like she was falling short because she couldn't use magic. But no matter how long it takes, she's determined to train and become a powerful mage. Until then, she's not coming home. She asks them to take care of themselves while she's gone. After reading that, Vincent drops to his knees, devastated, because he realizes he's the reason. He's the one who made her believe that becoming a mage was the only path to happiness. But the reality is, magic or not, she's his daughter, and he could never see her as anything less than worthy. As those words leave his mouth, Arthur steps aside and calls out for Lilia to come in, and to Vincent's astonishment, she enters from behind the door. She'd been there, listening, the whole time. Vincent, clearly confused, asks what's going on. That's when Arthur steps forward and begins to explain. He starts by apologizing for misleading everyone. He admits it must have been frightening to think Lilia had disappeared, and he deeply regrets putting them through that. But his reason was simple. He wanted to show Lilia that her parents' love isn't conditional, that even if she never learns magic, she's still cherished. Instead of reacting with anger, Vincent listens carefully. He begins to realize just how unaware he's been until now. So he walks over to Ray and Alice and expresses remorse for trying to rush Arthur back into the Academy without thinking. Then he turns to Lilia and sincerely apologizes for ever making her feel pressured to become a mage. He tells her that she doesn't have to attend the Academy, and she doesn't need to become anything she doesn't truly want to be. What really matters is her happiness. Lilia appreciates his words, but tells him that she still wants to go to the Academy, on her own terms. Even if it takes a few more years for her mana to awaken, she's determined to get there through her own effort. She wants to become a mage not only for herself but to bring happiness to others through her magic. Hearing this, Arthur smiles and promises to help her unlock her mana. Since he's already helping Lilia, Arthur decides to assist Eleanor as well. The two girls take a seat in the middle of the room, preparing to begin. He instructs them to breathe deeply, hold it, and slowly exhale with their eyes shut, trying to sense the mana within. Eleanor quickly connects with her energy, but Lilia struggles. Doubts begin creeping in, maybe she doesn't have it in her. But Arthur encourages her to keep trying. He places a hand on both of their backs, letting them know he's going to stimulate their mana, and that it might feel warm. As the process begins, shimmering lights dance before Lilia's eyes, and finally, her mana awakens. Her face beams with joy. It's a moment of pure triumph. Arthur soon arrives at the Helsty auction house alongside his sister Lilia, Eleanor, Alice, and Mrs. Helstia. Alice, slightly anxious about her children's behavior given the presence of royalty tonight, expresses her concerns. Tabitha, ever composed as the one overseeing the event, reassures her that there's nothing to worry about and encourages them to enjoy themselves however they please. As they proceed inside, walking down the lavish red carpet, Arthur mentally prepares himself to encounter nobles, aristocrats, and perhaps a few seasoned adventurers. From his perspective, the main purpose of this gathering is for wealthy attendees to purchase rare and valuable items curated by Vincent and other collectors affiliated with the Helsty auction house. Lilia leads Eleanor to a display featuring high-grade beast cores set to be auctioned later. Meanwhile, Arthur finds himself captivated by an odd statue, its purpose unclear. He briefly entertains the idea that it might be significant, but quickly dismisses it with a mental shrug. In another part of the venue, Reynolds fulfills his role as head of security, delivering instructions to his team to stay vigilant in case of any criminal activity. Soon after, Vincent calls for the audience's attention in the exhibition hall, signaling the start of the formal event and introducing the evening's esteemed guest. No less than King Blaine Glader himself has arrived, accompanied by Queen Priscilla, Prince Curtis, and Princess Kathleen. The crowd bursts into applause at their presence, and Arthur notes the overwhelming reception, deducing that the king must be a well-loved leader. With Vincent's announcement, the Helsty auction house's 10th anniversary officially begins, stirring a feeling of familiarity in Arthur. He recalls experiencing something similar in his past life. Vincent presents the first auction item, a finely crafted sword made by a world-renowned blacksmith. It's enchanted, giving it an electric charge that enhances sharpness and cutting power. The opening bid starts at 50 gold coins, quickly rising to 100 as eager bidders compete. Observing this, Arthur contemplates acquiring a blade of his own someday, one he could perhaps infuse with his magical attributes. The next item up for auction is a peculiar mask that, despite its plain appearance, is somehow considered far more valuable than the beautifully forged sword. Alice, keeping an eye on things, notices that Sylvie, Arthur's pet, is no longer on his lap. She quickly informs him, and Arthur recalls seeing Eleanor playing with Sylvie earlier. Concerned, Arthur steps away to look for her. Meanwhile, Sylvie has wandered into another room, specifically, a chamber where she unexpectedly encounters the royal mage of the kingdom. Back inside the exhibition hall, Vincent unveils the next featured creature, a world lion cub. Like Sylvie, it's a mana beast, and Vincent notes that this cub ranks as an A-class beast, indicating it's incredibly strong, fit to be the companion of someone from the royal family. Fittingly, Prince Curtis, the king's son, expresses his desire to have the cub and asks his father to purchase it for him. With no shortage of wealth, the king agrees without hesitation. Vincent then begins the bidding, hyping up the crowd by suggesting owning such a rare beast could make them legendary tamers. The auction quickly escalates, with bids shooting up to 500 gold. Without missing a beat, the king silences the competition by offering 1,000 gold on the spot. Unsurprisingly, no one challenges that offer, and the king secures the lion cub. Vincent congratulates him and invites him onto the stage, asking in front of the audience what he plans to do with such a rare magical creature. The king shares that while he'd love to keep the cub as his own familiar, he intends to honor his son's wish and gift it to Prince Curtis instead. Curtis thanks his father sincerely, promising to become a skilled beast tamer worthy of the cub. His mother expresses concern that he might neglect his academic duties in favor of bonding with the lion, but Curtis reassures her he won't let her down either. Meanwhile, Arthur suddenly hears Sylvie's distressed cry echoing from a distance. Rushing over, he discovers the king's royal mage looming over Sylvie, clearly bothering the small creature. Taking in the mage attire and demeanor, Arthur quickly realizes this is no ordinary figure, likely a seasoned conjurer. Not wanting to spark any conflict that might lead to dangerous consequences, especially with the king involved, Arthur approaches carefully, offering an apology before calmly requesting the mage release Sylvie, clarifying that she's his companion. The royal conjurer responds by claiming he thought the beast was up for sale and expresses disappointment that he can't acquire her. Sensing danger, Arthur suspects the mage might try to abuse his status to forcefully take Sylvie. Acting swiftly, Arthur reclaims Sylvie and respectfully says he needs to be on his way. Yet the conjurer blocks his path, declaring he has been searching for a beast like Sylvie for a long time and refuses to let Arthur keep her. He insists he could better harness her power and demands Arthur surrender her immediately. To intimidate him, the mage casts a blast of fire magic, assuming Arthur is just a foolish child. But Arthur stands firm, refusing to back down and calmly questioning why he should give up his own partner, regardless of the other's position. The royal conjurer insists that his actions are necessary for the nation and its future, but Arthur remains unmoved. He turns his back and begins walking away, paying no attention to the man's justifications. Feeling insulted, the conjurer raises his voice, warning Arthur that if he continues to defy him, not only he but his entire bloodline will suffer consequences. Arthur, having once held the title of king himself, does not take kindly to such threats. He stops, pivots slowly, and releases a crushing aura that fills the room. With narrowed eyes, he dares the conjurer to repeat his warning. The intensity of Arthur's killing intent shatters every glass object in the building. His sheer presence suffocates the onlookers, leaving them gasping for breath. Elsewhere in the estate, the current king senses an ominous disturbance and orders his guards to locate the source. Meanwhile, the royal conjurer collapses, paralyzed by fear and unable to speak. Arthur quickly realizes what he's done. His emotions burst forth unchecked, spreading terror throughout the auction house. What was meant to be a routine gathering spirals into chaos, with everyone on edge. Thankfully for Arthur, the crowd within the central building doesn't connect the incident to him. He lowers his head slightly and mumbles an apology under his breath, especially to Sylvie, who he notices trembling beside him. The event doesn't end there, nor is the situation easily brushed off. King Blaine contacts Reynolds, questioning if he is truly in charge of security, considering someone had dared to breach their safety. They hold him accountable for failing to protect the royal presence. Just as Blaine is about to pronounce a punishment, Sebastian, the conjurer, intervenes. He assures them that Reynolds is not responsible, arguing that no one was harmed, so there's no need to overreact. It may appear that Sebastian is defending Arthur, but he has another motive entirely. Blaine agrees to Sebastian's request, citing the conjurer's long history of loyalty and service to the royal family. Seeing an opportunity, Sebastian makes his move. He asks for the creature he's been desiring. Blaine, in turn, turns to Reynolds and inquires whether his son would be willing to give up Sylvie. Before Reynolds can answer, Arthur attempts to speak up, but is quickly silenced. Alice even pleads with him to stay quiet. Reynolds responds, clarifying that Sylvie was not provided to Arthur by him, so he lacks the authority to command Arthur to surrender the beast. With no alternative, Blaine addresses Arthur directly. He makes his request, but Arthur gives him a firm and immediate refusal. He makes the request again, a second time, but Arthur still refuses. He reminds Arthur that he is the king, and what he says should be treated as law. But Arthur isn't moved. Law for who? Not for him. On the third attempt, the king changes his tactic. He offers Arthur a lion he just bought, suggesting a trade for Sylvie. The offer only makes Arthur more furious. He steps forward and asks Blaine, "How much would you sell your son for?" Arthur reminds Blaine that he'd earlier claimed he had no intention of giving Sylvie away, not as a gift, and certainly not for money. Nothing they offer will ever make him part with Sylvie. He questions whether Blaine would also put a price on his own children. If everything can be bought, what's the price of Blaine's child? Sebastian, furious now, can't stand that he's being denied, and by a mere boy. In his rage, he commands his knights to execute Arthur. But as they close in, Arthur fights them off with force. Sebastian still doesn't take Arthur seriously. He mocks his soldiers, calling them useless for failing to defeat a child. Then he raises his staff to cast fire at Arthur. But before the spell can be released, Arthur freezes the entire hall. Everyone is locked in place, except Arthur and Sebastian. Arthur begins walking toward him. Sebastian, frozen in fear, threatens him with consequences, trying to shout for help. Arthur tells him it's pointless, no one can hear him now. Sebastian collapses in terror. Arthur approaches and touches his leg. Instantly, it shatters. Then Arthur speaks to him through the will, sending a clear warning, "Stay away and never cross this line again." Sebastian is trembling. He can't comprehend how a boy could be this powerful. Once Arthur finishes, he releases the freeze, and everyone returns to motion. But the effort takes a toll. Arthur collapses from exhaustion. His mother rushes to him in panic. Several days pass before Arthur finally regains consciousness. He reflects on what happened, realizing he had frozen time, even if just for a few seconds. The act had drained him entirely, showing that he still isn't strong enough to wield that power freely. He wonders what happened after he blacked out. Just then, Alice enters the room. She's overjoyed to see him awake and immediately runs to hug him, asking how he feels. He says he's fine but wants to know what ended the conflict. Alice explains that after he collapsed, they did everything they could to revive him. The doctors assured her he would wake up soon, but she had been overwhelmed with worry. She had already lost him once, and the thought of losing him again was too much to bear. Arthur feels guilty for putting her through that and apologizes. Later, she decides to take him along to the market for a walk. She's unsure if he's strong enough yet, but Arthur insists he's okay. While exploring, they come across a brooch. Alice thinks Eleanor will love it, so they decide to buy it. She offers to buy him more things, but he hesitates, not wanting to burden her financially. She reassures him, explaining that she has her own money and it's not a problem. It dawns on her that her product has grown quite popular, even among the nobility, thanks in large part to Tabitha, who introduced it to them. They shop for a while, gathering various items, and head home with their arms full. Upon arriving, they find someone visiting Reynolds. The man is deep in conversation with him. Arthur meets Reynolds' friend at the doorway, who tells him to stay quiet, but Arthur walks in anyway. They learn the king has sent an emissary to offer compensation for the recent incident. Reynolds is clearly upset, refusing to accept that money alone can make up for what happened to his son. He argues that Arthur nearly lost his life, and that cannot be taken lightly. Arthur steps in, asking what the king really said. The messenger responds that the king believes the situation was exaggerated. Arthur is irritated. It sounds like the royal court is trying to make themselves look like the wronged party. Arthur presses further, asking what happened to the knights who attacked him. The man replies that they were dismissed from duty. He then inquires about Sebastian and is told that he too was fired. However, when it comes to the matter of Sebastian's injured leg, the man says there's no proof Arthur was responsible, so it's merely Sebastian's word. He ends by acknowledging Arthur's talent but points out that Arthur lacks refinement. He advises Reynolds to raise his son with better manners. Arthur reflects on his own actions, admitting he may have been too aggressive, and agrees to accept the apology, along with the money. Once the visitor leaves, Reynolds does something unexpected. He gives all the money to Arthur. He tells Arthur that since he was the one who suffered, he's the one who deserves it. Reynolds insists he take it, explaining he'll need funds if he wants to build a future or start something new. Arthur realizes this is true. It's a heartfelt moment between father and son. That evening, Arthur is lost in thought. The incident opened his eyes. Despite all his strength, he's still a child in this world. If he truly wants to make a difference or wield authority, he must rise to a position of power. He leaves for a walk near the academy and spots a bird. Curious, he follows it. Then, unexpectedly, a mysterious woman appears. She addresses him by name, speaking as if she's known him all along, and says she's been waiting for him. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe for the next part.